we got a deal. So, welcome committee. We'll call the meeting to order of the Senate, Fed, and State. Today we have Scott Schwab with us to talk about elections. But first, we're going to request: are there any bill introductions? And I know Senator Faust-Godot does have one, and she's not here at the present time. She'll be back. But Senator Hildebrand, do you have a bill introduction?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do. It is RS 0090. It is concerning administrative rules and regulations.
Is there any objection, any questions on the bill? Are there any objections to the introduction? If not, consider it introduced. And Senator Faust-Godot, when she comes back, she will have a bill introduction. Close that door and be right back. At this time, we'd like to welcome our Secretary of State, Scott Schwab. We definitely appreciate you coming in today and talking about the elections. I know we've had some questions and we'd like to have a report on how the election went in Kansas.
One, so you can hear me. Two, if I wear it too long, I get an asthma attack and you don't want me coughing and hacking up here. And three, I did get COVID within 3 months, so I got my get out of jail free period going on right now. There, I just want to make sure that's pointed away from a speaker so it stops the loop. My old days of being a roadie sometimes comes in handy. I want to thank you all for having us here today. I want to let you guys know that, Kansas had a good election this year. Okay, that should help. If it starts to feedback, I'll stop. I want to thank you guys as policymakers, and sorry, Aletha Faust-Godot, you're going to hear the second verse is the same as the first that you heard the last hour. Kansas had a great election, and it was really difficult. It was incredibly challenging this year, but because of you giving our office and clerks just enough latitude, without too much latitude that they can completely upend and take the direction, an election in a direction it shouldn't go, you guys can trust the results we got in Kansas. And we did, and I was not a big fan of the law when we did the post-election audit bill. Let me see if that works. I wasn't a big fan of, I'm trying, Mr. Chairman, I really am. All right, we'll see if that works. I might have you take this off because my finger's going to die. So anyway, as it relates to, I forgot where I was, as it relates to the post-election audit, all 105 counties passed their audit. And so to kind of give you a picture of what it's like after Election Day is, these county clerks and their poll workers are up till sometimes 4 o'clock in the morning. And then the next day, we get in our office and randomly start cutting pieces of paper because it's real particular how you do it in the law to do an election audit. And the next day, we draw the random precincts that are going to be audited for each county. And that's an open meeting. No one ever goes because it's really boring. And then we send that out to the county, and they get to crack-a-lackin' on their election audit immediately, even before the Board of Canvassers can meet. That way, if there is an issue, it can be adjudicated and make sure every ballot counts. And a lot of times, that audit is the problem, and the ballot, the count on election day was actually right, so we go back and audit the audit and found out the audit had an error. But we do go back and do a hand count of a random precinct. If it does not pass, we give them another one. And if it doesn't pass, we keep on, we'll make them do the entire county until the problem's been resolved. And as a result of that, we're confident and know that every ballot in the state of Kansas was in fact counted that was legally cast. So with that being said, I'm going to let Brian come up and give you some of the numbers. But, I mean, this year was really, it was a rough year, but it was a good year. Well, thanks to Katie in our office, we did there's a lot of concern about poll workers as the pandemic started. We did a social media blitz. We recruited over 1,000 poll workers in 48 hours. In Douglas County, they ended up having so many poll workers, people that wanted to volunteer. Jamie Hsu ended up turning away over 400 people because he was just overstaffed. And so it's really a great testament to Kansas that want to come up and say, no, we want in-person voting, we want a good voting experience, but we want people to feel like it's safe. And not just we had a lot of elderly population that like to do their civic duty of working a poll worker during an election, but they didn't want to be exposed. And we said, okay, we respect that, but we've got to find somebody to take your stead, and we did. And even the concerns coming from your county, Lyon County, that we had in March, were not a concern when it came to August and November. We had all the poll workers. So we have some concerns, some things that did happen in the state, and I'll let Brian kind of go through that with some of the third-party stuff. And I'd love to have that conversation with you because there's concerns there. But that being said, he's got the numbers that probably a lot of you want to see, and I'll let him go over that with you, and then I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time if that's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Okay? Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Brian Caskey. I'm the Director of Elections for the state of Kansas. And I'm going to run over the numbers real quick, and then I want to talk about one or two other things. But the theme of today is record setting. Everything that we did in the 2020 general election was record setting. We set a record for the most number of registered voters in the history of our state, just under 1.94 million voters. We had the most number of people who cast a ballot in the history of our state, over 1.38 million voters, which comes out to 71%. 71% is not a record, and in the old prior to the passage of the National Voter Registration Act in the early 1990s, we would see turnout percentages that came close to 80%. So the percent itself is not a record, everything else is. We had the highest number of people who cast a ballot prior to Election Day in advance, over 830,000 people, which is 60% of every vote cast, which is also a record. We had the highest number of people cast a ballot by mail prior to Election Day, 460,000. We had an advance ballot return rate, meaning we mailed the ballot out and the ballot was returned to the local election offices of over 92%. Record in the history of this state with mail balloting. We had the highest number of people vote in person in advance, over 370,000 voters. Comparing this to 2016, the last presidential election year, which was also a high turnout year, we had over 100,000 more registered voters this year, and we had over 150,000 more votes cast than the last presidential election. So across the board, in a pandemic, Kansas stepped up to the plate and shattered every record that we've had, and that's a testament to the laws of this state and to the voters of this state who came out and voted in record setting. Those are the numbers. I do want to talk about one thing in particular that came to our attention this year. You may have heard about this from some of your constituents. We had quite an issue with third-party mailers, public interest groups that would send advanced voting applications and information to voters. You may have heard of a couple of these, the Center for Voter Integrity, which is based out of Springfield, Missouri, and the Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC, based out of Washington, D.C. Both of these groups would target registered voters in Kansas and send them 2, 3, 4, 5 different applications for a mail ballot, in addition to applications the voter may have asked for themselves or had received from the local election office. We received quite a few complaints about this. It added quite a bit of voter confusion because a voter had already turned in their application, thought they were going to get a ballot, and then they received another application, and then another one. So they would call, they would turn it in. Election offices were faced with processing duplicate registrations. And so we aren't sure if this was specific to 2020 or if this will be a trend in future elections. But I did want to comment on that. That was probably the single biggest issue that we received from voters. The biggest complaint was the confusion that was led by these third-party meetings. So other than that, we thought this election was an unqualified success. I'm happy to stand with the Secretary and answer any questions.
I am certain it will have questions, but I'll have one. I'll start off with that. I was knocking doors in Wichita area, and a voter came to me with 2 ballot requests, just like you recommended from Missouri, and I'm not sure where. On the back of that ballot was a small number, but it was a lot of numbers in it, and in the middle of that, it had an R. Would that mean Republican or Democrat?
It kind of depends. So during the primary, you don't have an election. You kind of have 2 elections. And so the Democrat ballots are counted separately from the Republican ballots because they're separate ballots or 2 elections. Primary, some counties will do R and D so they can just separate them. And in general, that's against the law.
Sure, when he got the ballot, but this was in the general election.
Sometimes in a primary, they will have a code of an R&D or an L or an unaffiliated, because some people, primaries, we do have nonpartisan races like county commission and stuff like that often. So they will have that so they can separate those out. But in the general, no, it's against the law to do that. And our printers know that.
Any other questions? Senator Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During this election, I saw some of the same ballots, but what was interesting to me, they looked just like our county's ballot application, rather, but they had a return address like to North Carolina or to Missouri.
So this goes to the problem that Brian brought up, these third parties, and it's frustrating because if you remember when we came in talking elections last year, we were concerned about foreign influence. And now all of a sudden we're getting applications from out of state asking for people's personal information. And some of the stuff on the applications not necessarily needed to process an advanced mail ballot. So, okay, is it going to the county office or is it going someplace else? And we were doing a voter registration drive in Wichita, and Lake Proskaudo had a constituent come up with 5 of them. And she was elderly, and she's like, I don't know what, I normally vote in person. I don't know what to do. Now, so how do you balance that with policy? I believe you as a candidate, if you want to hand out advanced mail ballots in your district, you should get out. I believe the Republican Party, Democrat Party, Libertarian parties, if they want to send out voter registration forms or advanced mail ballot applications, we've always done it. This was new, seeing these out-of-state actors. And my biggest concern is, are they even domestic actors in the United States? I don't know. I don't know who these people are. And constantly, are they over-collecting data? Are they misusing the information? Are they trying to create a profile in America, which we know a lot of nation players are trying to create profiles on just everyday Americans? And I don't know what the policy, where you balance it. We're not introducing a bill this year, because one thing, you guys got enough on your plate with a pandemic and budget and everything else you got to deal with. But this summer, we absolutely want to have the conversation of where do we draw that policy line that these out-of-state actors can't come in and confuse Kansas voters. And it was a bipartisan confusion. There was Republicans that were confused, and in Lake Proskaudo's district, it was mass confusion. So I think you all as policymakers and us as the administrators, probably need to sit down and say, where do we put that bubble so that it's a level playing field as it relates to who can register and how and whatnot, and we're not as concerned about opening up to data collection for any nefarious actors. And sometimes, I mean, we were telling folks, if it didn't come from your county, don't just throw it in the recycle bin. And that's why some states like Michigan, the Secretary of State sent a provisional advanced mail ballot application to every voter in the state. We didn't want to do that because we knew some counties were doing it. And I didn't want them to get a second one from our office. And well, now which one do I fill out? So I said, if the county does it, they can use a CARES Act money if they want to send it to all the voters in the district. But I think that decision is best made on the county level. It wasn't going to come from us if that's what they wanted to do. So hopefully I answered your question there. But yeah, it's a concern.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, it was. My concern was the return address going to a different state instead of going to the county election office.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's even a law to prevent that. That's why this is the conversation we need to have, and probably bring in the district attorneys and the governor's office to find out how do we do this. It's going to be a heavy lift, and that's why there's not this year. We only have a local election this year anyway. How can we do it for the next election so that we don't have the massive voter confusion that was starting to bubble this last election? That's really, if anything went wrong in the election, was that was able to happen, and we were constantly swatting out little fires. We had no control.
Thank you.
I'm going to continue with that in just a moment, Senator, just a moment. So if they go fill out their ballot, they get a ballot request, and they get it mailed back to them by somebody, maybe out of state, and they fill that ballot out.
Okay, that's different. So we're talking applications versus ballots. When you fill out, and this is what other states are looking, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Chairman, if you want to do, I got some Jewish heritage in me. The application process, and a lot of this goes back to previous administrations, going back to Ron Thornburg, the way we do this. When you fill out that application, you got to sign it. If someone you got to put your ID number on there, and then you get your ballot in the mail. And that ballot comes from your county seat. And then in that envelope, when you put the ballot in the envelope, on the outside of that envelope, you got to sign it, and you got to put down your ID number, your government ID number. And then if someone else turns in that ballot for you, they are to fill out a portion. And then we encourage people to take a picture of that. So if they took your ballot, Representative or Senator Hildebrand, and didn't turn it in, you have recourse because you have a picture. This person said they're going to turn in my ballot, and it's October 31st, and it's not there yet. So that's a lot of that goes back to Secretary Ron Thornburg, and then the Kobach administration pushed the voter ID. So they really made our mail ballot system secure. And I talked to Jay Ashcroft in Missouri. He goes, how do you do voter ID for advanced? And so they're now looking at it in other states as well. And we also do the signature matching as it relates to what's on that government ID, what was on the application, and what's on the voter registration form. And if there is a signature that doesn't match, they normally try to reach out to the voter and say, hey, your signature's not matching. How do we adjudicate this? Can you verify this is in fact you? And that happens quite a bit. And we train the county clerks and our volunteers for the FBI, KBI, curriculum as it relates. And some counties even use software. But signatures do change. A lot of times elderly will have a minor stroke, and that'll affect their signature. In the case of me, and I was talking this the last hour with Elisa Pascado, she remembers my signature when I was signing conference committee reports as chair of the elections committee. I made a doctor's signature look great. But now I sign historical documents. You know, Senator Cleveland, you got your certificate that you are now a state senator. I was embarrassed to put that little signature on your certificate. So I've slowed down, did what my first grade teacher told me to do, and started taking care of my penmanship. And so that signature looks different than it does on my driver's license. But it looked the same as it was on the application. But if it didn't match that application or that voter registration, then they probably would have called me and said, hey, we need you to verify that this is in fact you.
Thank you for that. Senator Pascado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Senator, Secretary Scott Schwab. So for those of you who, he's mentioned Sedgwick County quite a bit, and later I've got to ask the chairman, what was he doing in Wichita campaigning, but a sidebar. But I wanted to say that I thought, too, that the election, considering everything, went very smooth. I usually get, people will contact me with complaints, and I didn't hear many this year, and the secretary's willingness to come to Wichita 3 times, I believe, 3 or 4 times to do voter registration drives with us was very helpful to be on site and ask questions about the application that our constituents were receiving from another state, which was really confusing. And so I think I said this in the last committee you just presented, but for the record, if you could share with the members of the committee and those listening in, so you shared the individual that brought the five, she had 5 different applications, and she had been a registered voter for years and really confused. But share with the body of what you told people to do with it, just kind of toss it, but then kind of how we will address that in the future to help our constituency.
And again, that's probably a good, if you want to have, if you're going to be doing interim committees, that may be a good interim committee study, is how do you do that? What penalties should be allowed? Do we want a registration process if you're going to act like that in the state? Do we just ban it? I don't know the answer to that, and who gets allowed and who doesn't. I mean, I do think all registered parties in the state of Kansas should be allowed to mail out voter registration forms. But I also think, you know, if the NAACP wants to send it out, they should too. Can a college send it? Because they got students, you know. People seeking assistance from the state by law, they get a form there. So it's like, it's very complicated on where to do it, but maybe we just say it's got to be from within the state, and it's got to be, it must go back to the county office. I don't even want to come to our office because we normally don't process much of those. It goes to the county. That's done on the county level. I don't know. That's a good summertime conversation.
Senator Hildebrand?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Schwab, for your testimony and everything. Drop boxes were kind of a new thing this year, and I was just curious, are they defined as a polling place?
They are not. No more than the post office is. And that was my concern. Drop boxes really weren't new. They've been around for a long time, but it was up to the county to buy them. With the influx of advanced mail ballots, I didn't want them going through the mail. And here's a perfect reason why. And people always laugh at this, but it's actually, if you don't laugh, you're going to cry. The Postmaster General sent every Secretary of State by certified priority mail a letter saying allow more time for ballots to get from the post office to your county seat. I still haven't got my letter in the mail that he himself sent. I haven't gotten it. I'm still getting Christmas cards in the mail that were postmarked before Christmas. Your ballot's not insured. That postal worker is not a poll worker. So what could we do? Lyon County, she put hers right outside the office under a secure camera, bolted it to the building and to the wall, and we gave security parameters. Now we've had a conversation about that, and part of that I apologize. It was a bad day. But we gave them security parameters, and the county clerks ramped it up. We said, find a place, see if you can work with a community bank. But do it in a way, because my son got COVID in August, so I was, for the primary, I was in quarantine. So the only way I could vote is advance mail, but I don't want to mail it. I just got done telling people for 90 days, don't mail it. It was nice to just drive through that Johnson County office, drop it in the drop box, and head on home and not worry about coming in contact with somebody else. So that was the answer we had. And some counties felt like they had enough. Some counties needed more. We put parameters on how often you got to check them. And again, we wanted a camera on them in case someone tried to be nefarious and commit a crime with those lockboxes. But we had none reported.
Just adding on to that, when I had talked to a few county clerks that used drop boxes, because I was really curious how they worked. One of the questions I had asked is, when did you pick up the last ballot? When did you count the last ballot that was picked up? And quite a few of them said 7 o'clock on voting day. On advanced ballots, so is that considered an advanced ballot? So you would have 3 days past that? Or that was one of the things I didn't quite understand.
That's a good question. So at 7 o'clock, they take the last ballot out and they lock it. So no more ballots can go into that box. It's locked. So if you went to go buy a lockbox now, it's locked. You can't put anything in there. And so if you still have your ballot and you wanted to do the drop box, your only option is to put it in the mail and get it postmarked. Now, in another policy thing you may all want to consider as it relates to that right now, it's got to be postmarked by election day. And I agree with that. It absolutely should. I don't think somebody should know, oh, wow, it's only one vote. I still have a ballot. I'm going to stay after, but I know the score. I'm going to go vote. So I think that's important. But if it's received in the mail the day after the election and the post office failed to postmark it, you know it was sent on election day or before. That ballot should count. And then after that, you guys can weigh the policy how to do it. What we have in counties is people, especially in your smaller communities, the post office is right across the street from the clerk's office. So a lot of folks will mail their ballots and they'll get them and they'll walk them across the street to give them to the clerk. Well, to get postmarked, they got to send it to Kansas City. So if you're out in Bird City, Northwest Kansas, you're taking that mail ballot. It'd be nice just to hand it across the street, but they got to send it all the way to Kansas City to get postmarked to go all the way back to that community. And that's why we told folks, man, you better don't wait till Halloween to send that ballot in if you have to get it through the mail, because it's not going to get there in time. So, but as it relates to lock boxes, they pulled the last ones out at 7 o'clock. They lock it up, and anybody who wants to vote on election day after 7 o'clock, you have to get it in the post office and hoping they're even open, because they may walk in the next morning and postmark it the day after the election.
Well, the reason why I'm kind of touching on that, if they're not considered a mail-in ballot because they don't have a postmark and 7 o'clock is the deadline to be received, and a drop box is not defined as a polling place, should we revisit statute 25-1132 that says the time to be received and counted is 7 o'clock at your local election office or polling place?
Maybe. That's a policy discussion you guys need to have. The way it was done is, especially most communities, the lockbox was by the clerk's office. And so if I walk in, if I do an advance ballot, I can hand it to the clerk's office. And it's not considered a polling place, but they do count that ballot. And it's not necessarily just a mail ballot, it's an advance ballot. So it is a ballot that is cast in advance, not necessarily just through the mail. And Brian's standing up, so clearly there's a couple extra answers he has that I don't.
Not that you don't, I just want to clarify a little bit. Every single one of the 105 counties was directed repeatedly that at 7 p.m. on election day, there will be at least 2 board workers, Republican and Democrat, at every drop box in every location in the state to address that. So every county received probably at least an email, multiple phone conversations, and were ordered, you will man every drop box location at 7 p.m. on election day, clear it out, lock it up, and be done, so that there would be no question on what time did that ballot get in there. Did someone sneak one in at 7:30 or 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock the next morning? All 105 counties were instructed to do so, and to my knowledge, they all followed that.
So just to clarify, I just want to make sure that what's in statute, if we need to clarify that in statute to clear it up. So in statute, it says 7 o'clock to the election official or polling place. So if a drop box is neither the election official or a designated polling place, should we clarify that in statute that 7 o'clock, that's my question.
I think it's a very good question and one that is not clearly addressed. The word drop box is not in that law, so I definitely understand that.
Thank you.
I guess what we did is we just considered the Dropbox an extension of the county office. And in the pandemic, I didn't want all those ballots going through the mail because a lot of them. We do what's called a post-election survey, and I think we've got 20 counties outstanding. Those clerks got sworn in the same day you all did, and so they're kind of a lot of transit. We lost some clerks, so there's a lot of training going on. But we asked them, how many provisional ballots did you have? Why did you have those provisional ballots? Did you get any new election equipment? Did you, of the provisional ballots you had, why were they provisional? How many partial ballots did you have? So we compile that data, and we can give that to you when it's compiled. But part of that, part of that is, how many advance mail ballots did you have? And that way we can understand the volume. I will tell you this, assuming we're out of a pandemic by August, even if we're not, this is still going on, the advance mail ballots numbers are going to start dropping. A lot of those applications were filled out very early on when nobody knew where the world was. And we didn't hit 60% advance mail. So the majority of people in Kansas still like to vote in person. I'm glad we have options.
Okay. Senator Longbine?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott, thanks for being here. I know that I have, and I assume all of us have, received hundreds, if not thousands, of emails making some kind of accusations against some area of voter fraud, either on the state level or national level. How do we separate fact from fiction?
Well, and this is, and I said this the hour ago with Letha Pascadeau. I was not a fan of the post-election audit. I voted for it, but I wasn't really a big fan of it. Boy, am I glad we got that now. Because what happens is we do that post-election audit and it matches up with before the board of canvassers. What do you have right now as your vote count that you downloaded through that tabulator? Okay, here's your precinct, hand count. Every county passed, all 105. And if that precinct fails, then you get to go to another one. Okay, now you have two problems. What's happening? Why are the numbers not matching up? And again, often it's the audit that was wrong, not necessarily the vote count. We did find some small administrative errors, which again, I'm glad we had the post audit because there may have been 3 or 4 ballots in a county that weren't going to be counted had we not done the audit. And remember, elections are run by volunteers. It's not run by people that get a degree in election administration. It's run by volunteers. And they get trained pretty rigorously, but it's still, again, as volunteers. So, for example, one of the errors we had, I'm so glad we weren't a swing state, we had a county out in western Kansas that off their tabulator, it's Democrat, Libertarian, Republican. On our website, it's Democrat, Republican, Libertarian. They didn't make sure the Democrat matched the Democrat on the website. They just put in the numbers in the same order. So in that county, the Libertarian got the Republican votes according to our website, and the Republican got the Libertarian votes. Now, in the administration of the election, when you see the results, that's not true because they're going to certify what the actual truth is. But we had to call them and say, hey, you need to flip your numbers around. If CNN and Fox News and all these news stations are watching that one county website, they see those numbers suddenly flip, we get accused of fraud. Oh my gosh, you got hacked. They screwed up. It was an administrative error. Every ballot counted. No Roger Marshall ballots accidentally went to the Libertarian. It was an entry error. But during the canvass, that would have been corrected anyway because they had it matched up right. They just input it in our system wrong. So our system was wrong, their system was wrong. So it's things like that that cause us doubt. And we're fighting real hard to say, look, nobody's arguing the result. Nobody's suing us as a result we have. And that's because of a couple things. It's because of the way we handle advance mail ballots, and it's because of voter ID. It's kind of hard to commit a felony holding your ID up. I don't know any bank robber that would rob a bank and say, by the way, this is who I am. So it really has cut down on cheating in the state of Kansas.
And further questions, Senator?
Never did hear what the issue was in Shawnee County.
Oh, okay. Actually, and I want to give props to Commissioner Howe because he handled the situation really, really well. When you get done with an election and you shut down the poll, you start bringing you take the data sticks, put them in a Ziploc bag, kind of like a night deposit bag that locks, and then 2 people drive those sticks to the county office to be put in the tabulator to be counted, then you get the results. Well, there was a stick that was not returned. The question is, and this is the type of stuff that keeps us awake at night. Who has it and why? What had happened was you always have backup machines. So if one crashes, a battery goes dead or isn't working, you can pull out another machine, put it up there, and continue with your election. It was a backup machine. The poll worker didn't realize they were supposed to take the stick out of the backup machine. Nothing on it. And what he puts security tape over it. So if that security tape was breached, he is shutting down that tabulation, and we're calling the FBI. Why was that stick never done? Then the security tape was not breached, so 2 people went out, got the stick, and that group that was there to go back, find the stick, and drive it back, make sure, in fact, it was a backup stick. It was never actually used on election day, and then they were able to continue counting. But I really appreciate his quote that he had in the Cap Journal. He said, "I'm more concerned about security than speed." And so when he realized there was a stick missing, he just shut down the entire tabulation.
And the numbers that Brian shared earlier, were these off of these that we received?
Yeah,
earlier?
it's in there.
Okay, but they're not updated because these are dated back.
This is Katie. She's our comms and legislative director. By the way, you're probably all going to get to know her real well because she works in this building.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm Katie Copal. I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Communications and Policy. Like the Secretary said, you'll get really tired of me. So what we have before you as attachments, I'll stand back. The first is the State Board of Canvassers. We provided them a primary election overview. So that's kind of summarizing what happened in the primary election. That is the exact document we provided to the governor, the Attorney General's office, and the members of the public who attended that meeting. The second document is the same, but from the general election, outlining this is what we saw in the general election. Again, it was provided to the governor, it was provided to the Attorney General, members of the media, and you guys too, and anyone else who asked. And then the third attachment is a letter. Previous legislative leadership in mid-November requested a letter from our office addressing the Dominion voting systems accusations. We know there was a switchover, so we wanted to provide that to you guys as well to use in your district communications, should it be helpful.
And then just one comment. My sister actually received 8 or 9 of those applications, but what was interesting, several of them were from neighbors. So who would, with their names on them at her address? So would that be a postal situation?
It could also be just data, especially like in apartments. So this is why, you know, in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a little bit of pressure on our office to cancel all in-person voting and just mail a ballot to every voter. No, because our data's not that clean cut. There could have been 7 people living in an apartment. And I can send 7 applications, but good luck forging 7 IDs and 7 signatures. But I send 7 ballots. That's like giving cash. So that's why we do have the application process, because it gives us that level of security that if there's been several people living in an apartment or people for some reason have registered at that address, you're not going to get 7 ballots unless you have 7 people's government ID. Good luck on that.
So if I understood you earlier correctly, then the issue was with the applications, not the ballots.
Correct.
So when we talk about a blanket ballot being sent out, that's not necessarily true. Every ballot had to be requested.
The only time we send a ballot out directly to voters is during school bond. That's when a county can do it. And that's up to the school board to do it. I don't know why they do it. It's always more expensive to do it that way. And I do get nervous about that because you can have an apartment where 7 ballots on a school bond issue show up. And then that is a little bit harder to police. And that's a policy question if you guys want to delve back into as well. But as it relates to elections, as it relates to elections of people by statute, there is an application process, and you have to apply to get the ballot unless there's a medical exemption.
Okay, so your department did not send out just a bunch of ballots unless they were individually.
And we don't send out ballots or applications anyway. They always come from the county. We just administer the rules and the guidance on how to do it, so it's consistent from, Wyandotte County down to Morgan County.
So it's possible people could just perception, which could be reality, that because it's been done in one area, it was done here.
Yeah. So look, the State Board of Canvassers Committee is made up of the governor, our office, and the Attorney General. And I like Marty Schottenheimer's line when he'd always yell, and you can look at some of the old NFL films that he would say is the first preseason football game. He would go to those young players that are trying to make the team. He says, put your signature on the board. You've worked hard to get to this point. Now show that you've done your work to make this team. I put my signature on our work when we approved the results of the election. I knew when I put my signature on there, I'm saying that these are the results and I trust them. So it's easy to make accusations, but when you actually get in the inner workings, this is why we encourage folks, there's a primary election coming up this August. If you really want to see how an election's done, go volunteer as a poll worker. As an elected official, you can because your name's not on the ballot there. So just go through the training, volunteer with them. You'll learn more about elections than you will anything watching the news, anything I could teach you. You will see how complex and all the fail-safes and everything they do. You'll learn more about the law, election law by volunteering as a poll worker than you probably will even in this committee.
Yeah, and I learned a lot being able to be there during canvassing. So in your opinion, then, you're saying that, if I'm reading correctly, you would suggest we kind of streamline things as well with the ballot and with the school boards?
That's a policy decision for you guys, but it is difficult to police it if you're just sending ballots, because not always, the data isn't always that.
So for consistency, it would seem it would be something that should be changed.
That's a conversation you all should have.
Senator.
Very much. This might be a question for Brian, perhaps. This has to do with the residential piece. Is that me that's doing that? Is it my mic? Okay, and then I'll shut mine off with these. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So this is, if you remember, I called you during the campaign season as we were campaigning. So far, so good. And walking our neighborhoods, we were running into individuals who didn't actually live in a house, if you remember that. We would find UPS boxes, we'd find businesses that they would claim would be their place of residence. So I would call your office, then what happens next? And the reason I'm asking is for the benefit of this committee, but also when we had Shawnee County delegation, our district attorney was there, and he was given a list of like 15 residences that weren't really residences, that were registered voter addresses. So can you help us with that?
Yes, so what we would do is, I would share that information with the Shawnee County Election Office, because in the vacuum, I don't always know the facts, and it's the county that actually does the entry. So I would always share that with Andrew and say, hey, would you verify this, make sure there were no mistakes made. Then once that's happened, if there's evidence of a crime, then Andrew would have a conversation with presumably the district attorney or the sheriff, either one. Those situations are generally fact-specific. We do allow, if you do not have a residence, you are allowed to register and vote at a location that allows you to receive mail. So each of those situations would depend on some kind of investigation to kind of ferret out exactly what facts are.
May I ask you, in your opinion, what constitutes a crime then?
So the law defines residency. There's a specific law that defines residency for voting purposes. It's in Chapter 25, Article 9. I think the law is 25-409. And it defines residence. Kind of voter registration application, you're signing under penalty of perjury that this is my residence. If you lie on that and there's an investigation and you've lied purposely, we would provide that information to the district attorney. I am not an attorney, nor am I a prosecutor, so I don't believe I'm qualified to tell you exactly what's a crime and what's not, because I don't want to go down that road, because I don't practice law. But that's what we do. That's our analysis on whether or not to refer it to.
May I ask one just quick little follow-up? So what is your advice to us? Do we report this to our election commissioner? Do we report it to the sheriff's department? Do we report it to you? What do you want us to do?
Any and all of the above. Well, I will happily take your call, and I'll talk to Andrew, I'll talk to our own legal counsel, we'll talk to the attorney general, we'll talk to the district attorney. We're happy to help, and you can always talk. Whatever works, we will help.
Are there any further questions? If not, Secretary, thank you very much for showing up today. I'm going to give you an example of how good your people are. I went to a Lions Club meeting not knowing who the speaker was, and it happened to be the local clerk, county clerk. And she was very, very nervous that her applications or her audit would be approved. And she was excited when she heard that she had zero instance in her county. So thank you very much for the training you give those people. And the election in at least Kansas went well. Thank you very much. And if there's no further information that you want to put out or business, oh, yes, we do have one more bill introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So today, on behalf of former Representative Melody McRae Miller and an organization in Wichita, I don't have that name, I'll give it later. I have a bill introduction, an act, or sorry, Mr. Chairman, Connie, the bill, the RS number is 0223, an act concerning the Department of Health and Environment relating to the study and investigation of maternal deaths in the state of Kansas.
Is there any objection to the bill introduction? Seeing none, considered introduced. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further thing for the committee? This meeting is adjourned then. Thank you.